Antarctica is the planet's most unforgiving, most desolate, and least explored continent. Throughout history, this frozen wasteland has been home to countless myths, legends, and mysteries, and has repeatedly claimed the lives of those who have tried to explore it. The existence of Antarctica is no longer the secret it once was. It is waiting beneath the planet for those who want to discover it. But you are not allowed to explore it. You are not even allowed to go there. But why? Why are countries trying to keep this ice-covered continent out of sight, like a hidden treasure? Or is there some truth behind all this that they don't want anyone but a certain group of people to know? Today, we will take a journey to the frozen south of our world and try to unravel the stories told about Antarctica and the truth behind them. And at the end of this journey, many questions in your mind will be answered, and new ones will be born to be solved. Welcome to Real Secrets. Claudius Ptolemaeus was a very important Greek sage in the 100 AD. You may have heard of him as Ptolemy or Ptolemy. He was an extraordinary character who was recognized as an astronomer, mathematician, geographer, astrologer, and philosopher. Ptolemy spent his hunger for knowledge among the scrolls in the famous library of Alexandria in Alexandria, the center of knowledge of the ancient world, where he spent most of his life and left us dozens of knowledge in various fields as a legacy. But there was another very interesting claim he made that is relevant to our video today. He is the first person in history to mention a huge landmass in the south of the world, and he refers to this continent as Terra Australis Incognita, that is, the unknown southern lands in his work, called Geographia. How could this man make such an assumption? How could he tell us about the South Pole that no one even knew existed behind the vast oceans, when information about the continents of the world was so limited at that time? Ptolemy adopts the statements of Aristotle, who lived 400 years before him, that the earth is round, and his idea that there should be serious weights at the north end and the south end in order for the earth to stand in balance due to its roundness. Aristotle should be congratulated. Aristotle made a very beautiful inference without knowing the emptiness of space, and that the planet is actually floating in the air in a kind of void, not on a surface. Eratosthenes and Hipparchus, who lived about 200 years after Aristotle, present us very accurately by calculating the size and circumference of the earth. Yes, friends, 22,100 years ago, men calculated the shape of the earth, its circumference, and so on, using basic physics and mathematics, even with the limited means at their disposal. So to still make comments about the shape of the earth after so much time has passed, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. It's really extremely contrary to science and logic and outdated claims. And Ptolemy, thanks to the knowledge of these scientists, claimed that there should be a large landmass in the south to balance this landmass, considering that the landmass of the known world is mostly in the north, and he called this his theory of balance. And at that time, there was a common idea in Greece that there was a large landmass surrounding all the seas in the world. So the seas were actually an inland sea within this landmass, so there should be a landmass beyond the giant ocean that was its border. Here are the people today who think that the earth is flat and that there is a giant wall at the poles, are the people who take this ancient Greek error and sell it as fact today. But they don't even know that this error dates back to the Greeks 2,000 odd years ago, because they always copy and paste information from the internet of unknown origin and don't really investigate what lies behind it. This is the reason for my reaction to this claim. The reality of most people has turned into unsupported claims presented by 20-second TikTok videos. Please be careful with them and do your own research in every way, especially using artificial intelligence. This mysterious idea of the unknown southern lands of Ptolemy turns into a myth and a goal in the intervening 100 of years, and especially European sailors compete to be the first people to discover it. In the intervening almost 1,300 years, thanks to the maritime techniques that have developed, the age of discoveries begins, and the great sailors sail the endless seas to discover the unknown lands. And we come across maps that begin to present our planet to us in detail. Maps showing the coasts of North America, maps showing Asia and larger maps showing all these together, the mysteries of the world seemed to be unraveling until in 15/11, the great Ottoman sailor Piri Reis shook the world with an extremely mysterious map, the famous and mysterious map of Antarctica, which was not even known to exist before it was covered with ice. Piri Reis, one of the most critical names of the Navy in the years when the great state, the Ottoman Empire, was at the peak of its power, completes his work, which he calls the Book Baralit, an extremely valuable work in the name of maritime, which includes extremely detailed maps for its period, as well as navigation information, port information, geographical information, and natural events. In 15/13, Piri Reis, who was conducting research for his book on the one hand, presented another large map to the Sultan of the period, Ayavuz Sultan Selimi, an extremely comprehensive map that even includes information about the American continents. You know, this map is the famous Piri Reis map today, but in fact, this section you see is only a small section of a larger map. But this small section reveals the part of the continent of Africa facing the Atlantic Ocean and the eastern sides of North and South America, which were extremely valuable for their time. But at the bottom of the map, we see another interesting landmass. We know that Antarctica is there today, but how could Piri Reis have drawn this mysterious continent, which was only a myth at the time and without the ice sheet, which is said to have been on it for 1 million of years? You may be thinking that there must be information from the astral realm or drawings from an ancient advanced civilization behind this, and that this famous sailor of the Ottoman Empire must have accessed this information somehow. The truth is actually much simpler. Piri Reis did not receive any information from aliens, lost civilizations, or beings from the astral realm while making the map. He just compiled the information he received from previous sailors, as he himself clearly mentions in his book. Those who say that no one had discovered Antarctica at that time are wrong about one thing. Who told you that Antarctica was Antarctica? Internet forums, mystery videos, and so on. Right, however, it represents Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, the extreme region of South America. And since the continent had not yet been fully explored, Piri Reis made a mapping error and extended the unexplored parts of the region and spread them under his map because the extreme shape of the continent had not yet been fully explored at that time. This is a mapping error that we encountered in a few other places at that time. As a matter of fact, when the map is corrected with today's computer modeling, we now know how compatible the drawing is with the eastern side of South America. In other words, there is no mystery in the map of Piri Reis as you think, and even as I said, he himself mentioned the sources he used while drawing his map, and there are no aliens among them. Although there is nothing mysterious about the map, I think it was an extremely important source for those times. If only we had discovered those places when the Ottoman Empire was at the peak of its power before Europe, then we would be living in a completely different world order. We may not have found the mystery we were looking for in Piri Reis' map, but the map of Orontius Phineas, published in 15/31, complicates things a bit, because it once again reveals a southern continent that is clearly reminiscent of the Antarctic and is not covered with ice, and it is really under both Africa and South America. Oronte Fine, a French mathematician, astronomer, and cartographer, in his 15/31 map of the new and complete description of the world, used the notes and drawings of Ptolemy, Christopher Columbus, and Amerigo Vespuccini, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Now I have already told you that since the time of the Greeks, there has been a myth of a mysterious landmass in the south. So, in such old world maps, you often see a continent at the southern end. Even if no one has discovered it, this has been adopted as a basic pattern by many European cartographers. We can think that this map is no different, but there is an interesting point here. The shape of the continent in Fine's map is really similar to the shape of the Antarctic after humanity mapped the ice-free Antarctic, with high technology only in the 1990s. This is still a matter of debate, with some researchers saying that Fine actually drew the continent of Australia, which is unlikely because European explorers only recently discovered Australia, almost 100 years after Fine. When this possibility is eliminated, we are left with two possibilities. Either Fine took the lost southern continent that has been stereotyped for years, drew a continent in his head, and coincidentally made it look like today's ice-free Antarctica, or Fine was somehow able to draw what Antarctica looked like before it was covered with ice, as impossible as that sounds. This possibility would be taken very seriously by an academic who would live 100 of years after Fine and claim to have found Atlantis, an advanced utopia described to us in the notes of the famous philosopher, sage Plato, who lived 1,000 of years ago. Charles Hutchins Hapgood, born in 194, studied history at Harvard University and later became a professor of history. Although he was a professor of history, Hapgood had two other great interests: ancient maps and geology. Hapgood spent years trying to solve the mystery of the lost continent of the South, which appeared on maps 100 of years old. And he came up with an interesting theory by combing through hundreds of pieces of information, from ancient Greek myths to the map of Orontius Phineas. According to Hapgood, the global cartographic techniques used in these ancient maps were far ahead of their time, and also the coastlines of the continents, especially what he thought was Antarctica, were extremely well drawn. Hapgood blends this and other data with historical myths and claims that an advanced civilization that lived before the Ice Age bequeathed some techniques to humanity. Yes, you know the theory of pre-flood civilizations. According to Hapgood, this civilization had advanced maritime techniques, and their homeland was the mysterious southern lands that Orontius Phineas and the Greeks targeted. But there was only one difference according to Hapgood. The frozen continent known as Antarctica in the modern world was not there at that time. It was located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in a much more temperate and habitable place, and it was home to a very advanced civilization. This civilization, with its advanced seafaring skills, reached the Americas as well as Europe and Africa, where it shared ancient knowledge with other people. During the period of the Younger Dryas, known as the Flood, 12,000 years ago, the entire continent shifted to the southern end of the present-day world and was covered in ice. Other scholars at the time dismissed Hapgood's claim as nonsense, saying that how could the continents move, that it was scientifically impossible. What they didn't know was that the continents were moving all the time. This claim actually doesn't belong to Hapgood. Alfred Wegener first proposed the theory of continental drift in 1912, but even then, the scientific community rejected this claim as nonsense. Then, in 1950s, with the Ocean Floor Mapping Project, rifts in the ocean floor were noticed in the past decades. In 1968, the theory of plate tectonics put forward by Robert Parker and Dan Mackenzie was formulated. And in the 1970s, with GPS technology, it was proven that the continents were indeed moving very slowly. This is why science is variable, friends. It is not fixed, and science advances by open-minded people, not by academics who cannot get out of their dinosaurized molds. Look, in 1912, Wegener was mocked by his colleagues, but in the 1970s, it was proven. So if someone is talking about extreme scientific things, always approach it with a possibility of reality. Try to refute or verify that idea scientifically. Don't call it nonsense just because the idea is extreme, and there is no evidence for it now, but in the future, it may become a scientific law. You never know. Being open-minded in science and philosophy moves humanity forward. Remember that. But there is a difference between continental plate tectonics and Hapgood's claim. Continents move very, very slightly every year, so only after 1 million of years do we start to see changes in the continental shape of the Earth. But according to Hapgood, the huge continent of Antarctica, which is almost the size of the continent of North America, suddenly shifted to the South Polar Circle. Hapgood backs up his claim by saying that the top layer of the Earth, the lithosphere, which is the layer we live on, is about 200 to 400 kilometers deeper than the molten layer called asthenosphere, and it is through this layer that plate tectonic movement takes place. But Hapgood makes the claim that whatever happened 12,000 years ago, which was an event of unimaginable magnitude, the entire lithosphere layer of the Earth shifted at an extremely high speed. It became what it is today. The horrible destruction caused by this shift went down in history as the flood, and you will see that this claim is also mentioned later in the book, Adam and Eve, written by Chen Thomas. I have included the video in the explanation section. I think you should watch it. It's a really extreme claim, and scientifically almost impossible with our current knowledge of geology. I say almost especially because theoretically, it could actually happen. For example, there could be dramatic changes in the Earth's axis due to the gravitational effect of an exoplanet that would enter the solar system and pass close to the Earth. And in the meantime, such a shift could occur with giant fractures in the crust. Another possibility is that the Earth could pass through a very high-energy nebula or gamma-ray route, and high-energy materials could heat the core and the layers of the planet, causing the fluid asthenosphere to liquefy and the crustal layer to shift according to their center of gravity, like a stone on ice. These are really extreme scenarios, and God knows what will be left of the planet in such cases, so Hapgood's theory has generally been ignored. But our knowledge of geology is still very limited, so it is too early to say that this is crazy nonsense, as the old scientists did. And there may have been a catastrophe that we do not know yet. Hapgood's idea was later associated with the lost continent of Atlantis, and the idea that there might be traces of ancient civilizations under the 5-kilometer ice sheet of the Antarctic suddenly began to take place in popular culture. In fact, Hapgood was not the only reason why this idea was ignited, because we know that the Nazis made several expeditions to the South Polar region before the Second World War. And then in 1946 and 1947, the largest Antarctic landing in history was planned and implemented by the American Army. The high jump operation full of secrets, led by the famous Admiral Richard Byrd, began and gave birth to all the Antarctic myths you know today. After 1,000 of years of myths, the idea of the mysterious lost lands of the South was finally proven in 18/20 by the Navy of the Russian Empire, and the Antarctic continent was officially discovered by humans. From that day on, countries lined up to explore this region of the world with the harshest climatic conditions. The first comprehensive expedition was carried out by Admiral Byrd between 1928 and 1930, and a research and military base called Little America, one was established in the Ross Ice Shelf region of the continent. In the following years, Byrd organized several more expeditions to the region, but it was not only the Americans who explored the mysterious continent. The Nazis also made expeditions to the region in 1938 and 1939. And although many stories say that the Nazis were looking for the Atlantic, in reality, they were looking for the natural resources of the region. The Nazis who were preparing for war needed large quantities of whale oil and various raw materials, and planned to get them from this uninhabited continent. But with the outbreak of the World War, this transportation line was cut before it even started. The only real information that adds mystery to the events is that in the last years of the war, when the Nazis realized that the end was coming, various military technologies, and even Hitler, according to some, were smuggled from Germany to bases in Antarctica, and from there to Argentina and Chile. This is of course not a claim with definitive proof, but there are quite serious sources that some senior German officers escaped to South America and changed their identity and lived, so we cannot say that this theory is a lie. Who knows, maybe some technologies were really hidden under the ice. But whether you call it because of these secret Nazi technologies, whether you call it because of the myths of Atlantis, or whether you call it for completely unrelated reasons, right after the war, America sent a large fleet of 4,000 soldiers and scientists to explore Antarctica, in the most extensive experiments the region has ever seen began. Basically, the brief given to the press was presented as testing cold weather technologies, examining the climatic and geological structure of the region in various scientific research. But according to some, there was also a much more secretive side to the operation, making contact with advanced civilized beings living under kilometers thick glaciers. The stories told are that Admiral Byrd entered one of these large underground holes during the reconnaissance with his plane, and was welcomed by an advanced civilization there, made a speech, was released again after sharing information, and there was even a clash with these beings at the bases during this chaos. You can find all these details in my Operation Highjump video. Of course, all these alien claims that there was a civilization there did not arise as a result of a single expedition, but as a result of ice core analysis in the following decades. It was discovered that Antarctica was indeed once a temperate continent, covered with tropical forests and all kinds of creatures, and even its location was discovered to be not there, but in more temperate equatorial regions. Geological research has discovered that the shape of the land under the ice resembles the map of Orontius Phineas, drawn almost 500 years ago. Of course, not exactly, but it's not that it doesn't resemble it. So when all these discoveries come one on top of the other, people literally go into an Antarctic frenzy. Hapgood's theories and claims are suddenly accepted without question. Dozens of books about the idea that ancient civilization is waiting for humanity. There are suddenly spread on the market, and Antarctica suddenly becomes the world's greatest mystery. However, while all this Antarctic madness was at its peak worldwide, and people were dying to go there and discover all its mysteries, the Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1959 in Washington with the participation of 12 countries in a hurried manner, and the entrance and exit to the continent was closed to humanity as you know it. One gets suspicious, doesn't it? Why is it forbidden to go there instead of exploring it? Why can't airplanes fly over it? What is hiding there, especially when satellite technology and photographs of such interesting formations have started to circulate all over the internet? In fact, it is useful to handle the event here with a solid head first. Otherwise, you will get lost in paranoia and conspiracy theories. Let's start in order. One of the biggest reasons for the international interest in Antarctica, which started after the American researches, was actually the effort of the states to seize the regions there and their really extremely rich resources. Let me give a simple example. The known oil reserve of the whole of Russia is 80 barrels. But the oil in the Ross Sea region in the Antarctic is thought to be 50 barrels. In the period of great industrialization after the World War, an attack here could have triggered a new war between the countries, and of course destroyed the natural life. For this reason, the Antarctic Pact was signed, and it was decided that countries could not use the natural resources of the region and conduct military studies on it. In other articles of the agreement, there are also articles that the region will be used for scientific studies with the approval of the member countries, and any data found will be shared among member countries, so that agreement is actually a really good agreement. Now, if only America and its allies had made the agreement, we would say that there is something dirty in this. But even at that time, countries that were against each other signed it, and today this number has increased even more. So it makes more sense to attack the resources and prevent possible conflicts rather than hiding a mystery there. What about Admiral Byad's high jump operation? What about contact and even conflict with aliens? The people who claim that Admiral Byad wrote these things in his diaries are actually just people who wrote various books and programs to make money during that Antarctic craze. Normally, there is no such information in the Admiral's diaries. Let's listen to the man's own narration in the television program he appeared on. I tell you one reason they're interested. It's by far the most valuable, important place left in the world for science. That's where the scientific groups all over the nation are really interested. But more important than that, it has to do with the future of the nation because it happens to be an untouched reservoir of natural resources. As I said, all those underground civilization conflicts are, as I said, completely fabricated, and the fabrication of the types who have published 2 books and hit the jackpot. The Admiral's family and friends have also made statements about these issues. And it has already been proven that the diaries claimed by the authors do not even exist in reality, and none of the authors have even once shown the diaries they say they have captured. As for the ban on flights over the continent, remember that Antarctica is almost as big as North America due to the extremely dangerous weather conditions in the region, the magnetic pole, which would damage electronic devices and endanger flights, and the lack of a runway to land in the huge area in case of an emergency. It is also a ban imposed to prevent other countries from secretly flying over the continent and landing in the center and secretly doing some things, of course, which is why the control is not only in the United States, but also in the member countries. The fact that civilians are not allowed to Antarctica is not entirely true. For scientific studies, 56 countries included in the agreement today can conduct research there with permission, including Turkey. If you say, I want to go as a citizen, there are also Antarctica tours for very serious money. You can even go to some coasts, but it is forbidden to go towards the center. But if you think that it is around -80 in winter and 20 degrees in summer, you will understand why, and absolute death will be waiting for you. As for the mysterious formations that appear in satellite photos, one of the images you'll often see on the internet is this one, for example, which looks like it's been crashed into the ground and dragged along. Many conspiracy theory sites call this image a crashed spaceship, but in fact, the uncropped version of the image shows that it's actually a rock rolled down a mountain slope. What about pyramid shapes? This would be really interesting if it were outside Antarctica. Normally, it's hard to see sharp edges in nature. Air and water erosions soften the edges. But not ice erosion. Glacial erosion works like a razor blade, cutting even the hardest rocks into sharp edges, which is why you see mountains around the world with sharp edges where there were once glaciers. And don't forget that what you see is actually just the top of the Ellsworth Mountains that is not buried under the snow, so there is a huge mountain underneath. What about the mysterious tunnel entrances? That is true. Yes, there are dozens of photoshopped fake images, but there are indeed large cave entrances on the continent that open in summer and close in winter. But it is wrong to immediately call them alien landing ramps. In short, almost everything you hear about Antarctica. Let's leave some margin for the channel Mystery Channel. 99% of them are internet legends that people tell without showing evidence, without showing a few historical records, and most of them have turned out to be lies, just like the story of Admiral Byrne's diary. So when you go on a program and sit back and say there are aliens in Antarctica, the Nazis went and met with them, then America fought them. Then it was forbidden to go there because there is a giant wall there. You soup up all the fake information going around and present it to people. The Nazis went there because they needed to store oil before the war. America went there because they wanted to access resources. The countries united and banned it with a treaty because it would probably trigger World War III. The giant ice wall deer comes from the belief of ancient people who did not know the world 2,000 years ago, that there was a big land around the planet. In short, there are answers to all of the above, as long as you do your research. But one thing remains a mystery. Could there really be traces of a civilization under 3 to 5 kilometers of glacier? The only thing that can be discussed is whether the continents really shifted during the extraordinary period called the Flood, 12,000 years ago, like Hapgood's theory. Yes, it is an extreme claim, but it is intriguing. And whether Atlantis, which is said to have been an island country at that time, could have slipped into the South Polar region and frozen. Today, science says that this could not have happened because the continent has been covered in ice for 1 million of years. And it shows that the last time that Antarctica was really close to the equator was 200 million years ago, when the continents were close to each other. But we don't know if there was a civilization on the planet 200 million years ago. Maybe there really was a civilization and it disappeared over time. Normally, there would be no trace of any civilization left in such a long time. Nature would wipe it out. But the continent has been frozen for 1 million of years, so some things may have been preserved, and we can only discover this if one day the ice of this huge area thaws. Otherwise, it will be a very difficult test to drill through 3 to 5 kilometers of ice and conduct research at 80 degrees, especially in an area of 16,600 square kilometers. Even if there are no aliens or knots involved, the continent is really a very mysterious region, especially from a scientific point of view. And it seems that as long as the ice is there, the continent will continue to remain a mystery, and this means that it will continue for a long time. But who knows, maybe one day something will reveal itself to us from under the ice that is thinned due to global warming. And if something tangible is discovered, then I will make the first video for sure. After all, the purpose of the channel is to research and discuss the unknown. But unfortunately, almost all of the information circulating around right now is clickbait garbage information. Of course, I don't believe that governments share everything with us, honestly. That would be naive. But to say that there are highly advanced aliens in a frozen desert, just because we don't trust governments, seems like a far-fetched claim to me. Because I haven't found a single conspiracy theory claim with a solid infrastructure. They are all up in the air, easily debunked. And don't forget that the continent is controlled not only by the United States, but also by dozens of countries. So someone can't just run around there as they please. I think rival countries would expose it instantly. If you have done research on the continent, and you really have some tangible information that I haven't touched on today, please write in the comments and let's discuss it. After all, we are really talking about a mysterious frozen land that is 98% unexplored. Who knows, mind over mind, maybe we can catch something from one end. Thank for watching, subscribe and like for more.